In this Inspirational People interview, I'm speaking with Maria. Maria, say hello.
Hello.
Maria Joyner is the co-founder of FounderScale. On a prior episode of the podcast, I spoke with her co-founder, Josh Sweeney. For those not familiar, FounderScale helps organizations leverage HubSpot to increase sales and enhance marketing. Maria is an entrepreneur, marketing technologist, HubSpot specialist, and an American expat living and working with her husband and son in the jungles of Costa Rica. Her professional background includes email deliverability, marketing automation, and scaling B2B startups. She considers her greatest professional achievement surfing during the workday. So, Maria, tell us about you and your story. Let's get started.
Hey, Jason. Well, thanks for having me on today. And that was a great introduction. I actually did surf this morning, so I am continuing that greatest professional achievements. Um, well, as you mentioned, I'm down here in Costa Rica, but I haven't been down here my whole life. I was born and raised in Georgia, in Savannah, and grew up there, moved to Atlanta for college, and then was really active in the technology community in Atlanta. That led to helping grow a tech startup, email deliverability startup, from 0 to 2 million in a little over a year and a half. And that was a wonderful, crazy ride. And then I came to visit Costa Rica and sort of
and what
kind of
part of the
changed the
US were you in?
direction. I was in Georgia, and at that time I was in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how different was Costa Rica when you landed?
Well, I came down here just it was a birthday trip to myself. So I think I bought the trip in May, and so the trip was actually in November. And it was my first time traveling to Central America outside of like cruises I did as a teenager, which doesn't really count as any sort of like real travel. And we went to a permaculture farm that was off the grid, so hydroelectric, grow everything they eat, ecotourism, but really taken to the level, like very authentic level. The
Yeah.
entire property was really designed to work with the natural systems of nature. And so that's where we went and stayed.
Yeah.
So all natural systems, right? Not these technology systems that we build, not these coding systems. And so we went there I was there with a group of friends. One of my good friends has a travel organization called Under 30 Experiences. And they do small group travel for folks over 30 as well. You don't have to be under 30, but it's groups of 12 to 15. And they go to these like very example, like permaculture farms, or it's very local, conscious tourism. And so we went and stayed at this farm. It's called Rancho Margot. It's a little close to La Fortuna, near the Arenal volcano in in Costa Rica. And when I got off the shuttle, I felt like my soul jump out of my body. And I was like, what is this feeling? And I just looked around, and we're in the middle of the jungle. I think it was sprinkling. And I just had this very just strong experience. I'm like, what was that? That was strange. And spent just the next 5 days just, wow, like how does this place like this even exist?
Yeah.
Um, and at the end of that, the last day of the trip, we do a rosebud and thorn. I think we did that every day, but the last night we did a rosebud and thorn. And this whole time I felt this connection to this place. I'm like, I have to come back and like see what's under the hood.
Yeah.
Because I just scratched the surface. I'm like, well, if they have people who come visit here, then how do they grow enough food to support the groups? And I had all these questions.
Yeah.
I had all these questions, like from a systems perspective, like how do you make a system like this actually work?
Yeah.
And it turned out they had a volunteer program. So you come stay for a month, you work in the garden, or there's a couple other, I think, areas of focus you can choose, and you essentially get room and board in exchange for your time.
Mm.
So I was like, I'm going to do that. Had a company back in the States. We had our, fast growing company, and I'm like, no, I'm going to do that. So I talked to them, and they were like, yeah, we can make that happen next year. It was November, so I think it was going to be June of the next year, June 2015. So I told everybody, I'm like, I'm coming back. I'm going to volunteer. This is going to be amazing. And I left and went home and kind of started planting seeds around with my co-founders and the company. Like, hey guys, maybe we should do this company-wide perk that anybody can work from anywhere they want and for the month of June. And this is back in 2015, right? This is pre-COVID. Remote work is, I mean, it was obviously, it still existed, but it wasn't like it is now.
Yeah.
And they were like, all right, Maria, let's do it. And so I was super pumped. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to go like live in the jungle. And so I had this all planned out, and I was going to basically work in the early mornings with my organization, work in the garden during the day, and then work in the evenings with my company. And everything went great when I got down there. But as soon as I got there, I was like, this is not going to be a month. Like, I just knew. I'm like, this is not going to be a month. And it was an amazing experience, like really, truly amazing experience to see under the hood of this permaculture farm. So amazing of experience that I really started questioning everything I was doing in life. I was super happy. I mean, I loved everything I had in the States. I loved growing a company. We did tech events every night. I helped organize startup weekends. It was really something that I loved it all. But I was starting to question everything.
Was it just a matter of like making or kind of considering such a big decision, sort of like a domino effect? Like, I can remember in 2017 when we bought a house, I started thinking about things that I hadn't considered until I had sort of thought about buying the house, right? Is it kind of that type of situation?
So what was going through my mind was really like, am I crazy? Like, have I just come to this place and completely just lost my mind to want to couldn't even consider to leave everything that I built in the States, like the team, the company, just the life, everything I built in the States, to just move somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's really what I was struggling with more so than that. And it wasn't even, I couldn't even get to the point of what happens next. I was really in the point of am I insane right now?
Yeah.
And so it turned into 3 months.
Yeah. Well, did that sort of questioning your sanity, did it lead you to want to figure out how to ground your decision, like that what you were doing was worthwhile and justified?
So I think what this whole experience really led me to was just getting grounded enough to be able to turn off my brain and really listen to like what I want. I struggle to use the word heart, because I don't mean heart in the sense of like love. I mean like from like a soul level, from like really what I wanted. Because the brain is like, Maria, you have a fast growing company. You guys have 15 employees. Like all of these things, like you're going to lose everything if you do this. Like all of these things in my brain are like saying these facts. These things are very true. Yes. But inside, I'm like, does that, what matters, And I think this process really got me to a place of learning to be completely silent and really listening and identifying what was the brain that doesn't want change, the brain that wants us to kind of stay in the same place. And, it doesn't want to get out of bed in the mornings to go, to go out and walk, or it kind of doesn't like change, versus, maybe the soul or the heart or whatever you want to call it, whatever word, we can insert here, that's really screaming out like, this is really what I want to do. And so that was really the struggle, was learning to silence the brain enough to make sure that the soul piece, the intuition piece, the heart piece was really authentic. And it was.
Yeah. So how do you contextualize the change of the life you lived and the life you were living, in the sense that, like, looking back at that time through the lens of what you've now experienced, how do you see that?
Well, I loved it. I mean, I still feel it's just amazing. Like I loved the life I had in Atlanta, and everything that I built with the team. And I look at it fondly. I miss those. I miss going to startup weekends and being totally immersed in technology and all these ideas. And if anybody doesn't know what a startup weekend is, it's essentially like a 72-hour hackathon where people come and pitch these ideas, and then there's people who write code, so developers, there's designers, there's business people, there's marketers, and they
Yeah.
basically build and launch a product over a weekend. So I like look fondly back on those memories, and I'm super grateful I had them, because I mean, it was so much fun. It's really, it's a lot of work, but it's so much fun building a technology startup,
Yeah.
and it's so much fun building a community. So I look back on that really fondly. During that time, though, when I look back on myself during that time, like when I left Costa Rica, obviously went back to the States to try to drop back into my life.
Yeah.
Just pretend like nothing happened, like, oh, just go back to everything normal, which I couldn't do. But when I look back at the month or two that I was in the States, it's almost like I was watching a movie reel. Like I
Mm,
can go back to the moment that I had the conversation with my business co-founders, and they were like, dude, just go. Like,
yeah.
it's so obvious that you're just like, you just go, like, it's there. It's so obvious that that's where you want to be. And, like, please. And, so it's like looking back on a movie when I look back at that, because I don't get any of those things now. Like, I'm in the jungle and I mean, I'm not in straight jungle. I mean, there's this supermarket down the road, right? But there's no having conversations about building technology applications, or running into somebody who's like, oh yeah, I'm working on this idea, or there's not those serendipitous connections that I would have in Tech Square in Atlanta,
Mhm.
or in Atlanta Tech Village in Buckhead.
Yeah. So it sounds like in a lot of ways, it's not that you were escaping some dreaded existence. It's that you were really leaving something you loved and moving just towards something different and something that you loved more, right? From
Definitely.
Yeah. So how did you what advice would you give to someone that's like in that place that you were in Atlanta? Maybe they're considering that leap, that crazy leap, or maybe they've made that decision and now they're questioning it like you were. Like, what kind of advice would you give to that person?
I think it is to, when there you feel like, oh my gosh, I need to pick up somebody and call them about this and get some of their opinion. When you have that feeling or those thoughts, and like you're able to stop and be like, no, the only person I need to ask is myself. And it's like
Okay.
being able to stop the urge to go external, like to get advice from somebody else or ask them what they think about this, and stop and really focus internally. And so that's the first thing. Because when
Well,
we make big
yeah.
decisions, go ahead,
Well, I was gonna
please.
say dive a little deeper into that, because that internal I think to a large degree that external desire, we're looking for that influence or even authority at some point to sort of shape how we're kind of contextualizing this situation and decision. Um, but there, I think what you're describing is you're not just making a decision to move, you're also kind of taking self-authorship of your life, is what I'm hearing. I don't know if that's something you relate to, but I'd be curious if you could dive deeper into that.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really interesting concept. That maybe I just breezed over, but it's a practice that takes a lot. That's taken a long time to develop. And I think this is like, I mean, this is a pretty big topic, because from a young age, we're already being primed to want certain things or to believe certain things, or how we define success is already being shaped from a really young age. And I think even now, I'd say that is more true than when I was a child. I mean, and I think that's it's actually to a faster degree at which kids are exposed to, this is success and this is what you need to do to
Hmm.
get there. Like when I have
Yeah.
conversations with my friends and they're like, if we go travel for a year, they're going to be late for pre-K and they're going to be behind. I'm like, this is like that. So it's that example of things. So kids are
Yeah.
starting at a young age to be I don't want to say indoctrinated, but really indoctrinated on what and how, and just all these different ideals. And so I
Well,
think it's harder now.
would you also even say that there's a almost an infinite amount of conflicting definitions of what that even is in terms of what success is for a kid or
Totally.
for yourself,
Totally.
right?
Or
Yeah.
human, like I think that success is such a relative term, because if you ask somebody, if you had all the time and money in the world, what would you be doing? People who truly understand what success means to them, like in a way that this is what fulfills me. And I think maybe that's the other caveat is fulfillment versus success. You can have success and not be fulfilled. And so
Mhm.
maybe that's the key there, is looking for fulfillment versus an external definition of success, and then adjusting your internal definition of success to be more focused on like what's fulfilling.
Yeah. So how would you differentiate the difference between achievement and fulfillment? And how would one synthesize the two into overlapping versus um, maybe antagonistic ideas?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think when you look at from a strictly like academic standpoint, right, achievement would be getting straight A's, right, and
Mhm.
or being the valedictorian, or being the top 10 of the class. Like maybe that's viewed as achievement, but that doesn't necessarily mean that person feels fulfilled. And so in some ways, achievement sounds more of an external, and fulfillment sounds more of an internal, but they can totally both be related. And like you mentioned, they could probably also, achievement can also maybe lead to lack of fulfillment, because the desire to achieve gets such a narrow focus that we go after that so much that we kind of, forget, why we started the journey in the first place.
Yeah. So I think it's part of what I'm hearing from you. You correct me if I'm summarizing this, but in terms of my request for you to give advice to someone that's in this kind of state of change, one, it is to take those steps towards self authorship, um, not to ignore these voices, but I think also to kind of shift the priority of like these voices have shaped who we are and what we do to a degree that I now have to sort of subordinate those to something higher. And I have to figure out what that is before I can even hear those voices. Is that a helpful way to kind of make sense of it?
Yeah, and there's always like extreme examples, right? If you're thinking about like quitting your job and moving with, $500 saved, probably everybody's telling you that's not a good idea. They're probably correct, right? So there's definitely exceptions to that. But I think the bigger thing is, what I've found is, at least what I've seen around me, is sometimes when we have really big ideas, a couple of the people who are closest to us may not be supporters of those ideas, and they can discourage them. And so I
Hmm.
think the bigger advice would be to somebody who's thinking about doing something like this is finding someone who's done it and talking to them and connecting with them, and having that person to be like, hey, am I actually crazy, or is this normal?
Yeah.
To have somebody who's gone through what you've gone through to get that gut
Mm,
check. I think that is really important. And then you have an ally, and then you have hey, when should I hit the emergency parachute, to
yeah.
get out of this, or should I just keep flying and keep going?
Yeah. So there's also an alignment of, I guess, values in that sense, or experiences, someone that's gone before you. So like when you were going through that, because you're questioning everything, like what was the grounding vision that you attached to kind of give you clarity?
So I was so impressed at where I was.
Yeah.
The physical location of where I was, Rancho Margot. I mean, it is incredible.
Yeah.
And I was so amazed by how the natural systems all work together. And I was just, I mean, almost infatuated by just the lifestyle. Like, if I had a question, I had to go find the person and ask them. Like, I
Yeah.
couldn't just text them or call them. Like, I had to
Yeah.
physically go find them and ask them a question. And so I wanted, my plan, my clarity was, I'm doing this. I'm
Yeah.
going to leave United States, and I'm going to move to Costa Rica. I'm going to find a piece of land, and this is what I want to do. I want to build a permaculture farm, and I mean, I really clearly had it all laid out when I made the leap. And so I very clearly made the leap to come here, to come to Costa Rica to start a new project. And
Yeah.
that's what helped me like do that.
Mm. And so yeah, that's interesting because it sounds like you experienced something so profound that you didn't quite know what to make of it, but you knew you needed to be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
So, you mentioned there were two or another thing of advice. Do you remember what the second thing was? The first was like sort of closing out the other voices, but do you remember what the second was?
Um, I mean, it was not listening to, the external voices, but it was also being able to sit in silence and really
Mm,
truly understand, like really go inside, and some meditation's a great way to get to this place, prayer, really whatever, like whatever the route is. If some people do it through running long distances, surfing. I mean, there's
yeah,
different ways to find the stillness inside. But the advice is to find that vehicle, whatever that vehicle is for you, and to be able to find the stillness, to be able to start understanding really truly what it is that you want. I think it's really easy, for at least for me, to be like, I don't want that. But I
hmm,
think what I've always been really fascinated by for myself personally is I'm so bad at knowing what I want.
yeah,
Like I'm just not good at it. And the way that I have started to circumnavigate that is starting to listen to getting to the place of stillness and being like, all right, yeah, this is something that I
yeah.
really like want to go after.
Well, I would say that your experience of not knowing what you want is more common, or is quite common. In fact, most people veil what they want even to themselves, right? So how would you help someone navigate, and not everything we want is also good either. So there's that too. How would you tell someone to figure that, to navigate those desires, and also to appropriately order them as well?
Well, I mean, that's it's definitely not an easy thing to do. I think writing and reflecting is important. Like when
Yeah.
we're going through really big changes in life, the more that we can get out of our brain and the more we can get on paper is really important, because once it's on paper, it frees up our brain to kind of go a little deeper and process. So I think that's important. Um, if we go back to like the brain versus heart, there's always the list making. So like the pros and cons, and like the pros of this decision, the cons of that decision, and actually looking at the pros and cons. And if the con, and really seeing, are the things in the pro list or the things in the con list, are they items, are some of them items that are there because of fear of change, and really understanding like where these feelings of resistance are coming from.
Mm,
So is this fear of resistance coming from the fear of change? Like, I don't speak fluent Spanish, or, like, I don't know, there's no hot water, or there's things like, are these fear of change, or are these actual real like cons, or problems, or things that are red flags? Red flags is a better word. Um, and I think at some point, we just have to learn to be like, all right, I'm going to trust myself on this. And if I fail, then I learn. I think also the bigger thing is not being scared to fail. Like when we do big stuff, like if I moved here and a year and a half in, and this happens to quite a few expats, and not just in Costa Rica, but in other countries, and Costa Rica especially, because things are not efficient here.
yeah.
Um, but you move down in a year and a half, I'm like, this is miserable. You also have to have the courage to be like, all right, I tried it. I followed my heart. That was amazing. I got to give myself credit for following my heart and listening to what I wanted. But this isn't the right thing for me. And I can go, and now I'm going to go find the next thing. And I think being okay with that is really important, because we can't beat ourselves up if something doesn't work. We tried it, and that's really something to celebrate, is trying the crazy idea or doing the thing, because you did the thing and everybody else around you, they're still doing their thing that they were doing when you left to do the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So any other advice you'd give to someone that's in the middle of that decision making process, or have made the leap, and the truck's in the driveway and they're about to leave?
You know, um, just do it. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if the truck's in the driveway, let's just go. Just go. Like
Yeah.
make it happen. I will say one thing, just like practical advice. I would definitely visit and really know before you buy. One thing I see commonly is when people are ready to leave the United States, their mind's made up and so they buy. Things don't flip as fast in other countries as real estate may flip in the United States. To the extent of you can buy a house and still have it 10 years later. So I think if you really are seriously thinking about making the move, I would really recommend spending a little bit more time finding a place to rent before making the decision to purchase. I know that's not viable for some people. Some people have to sell a home and buy a new home, but if you can do that, that could save you, some pain in the long run. So that would be the only like real practical advice I would give.
Yeah. So you land in Costa Rica. What did you learn from that experience about living better?
Well, it's Costa Rica. There's a phrase here in Costa Rica. If anybody listening to this has ever been to Costa Rica, they've certainly heard it. It's called Pura Vida, and it means the pure life. And it's a mindset. So living better, is really about a mindset. And Pura Vida really supports that whole mindset. So for me, I am a product of my environment. So, put me in the hustle bustle of the tech community and I will be at every event. I'm going to be, working, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm a product of my environment because I thrive off of that. Put me in the jungle of Costa Rica and things come down at quite a few notches. And I'm a product of that environment. And wow, what an amazing environment that is to be a product of. You're breathing air that's literally just come out of the trees. You're drinking water from the mountain. You just have these, you're just so much more connected to nature and the land and all of this. And so I think for me personally, living better is putting myself in an environment that I can thrive in the majority of the pillars in my life, right? And so the pillars are what, family, community, business, personal, and spiritual. If those are pillars, I kind of just rattle those off. But I may not be able to thrive and go find the next company to acquire to grow our company in the jungles of Costa Rica, but the other 4 pillars I'm able to thrive in. And so for me, it's really identifying the location that can help the empower me to thrive the most I can as a human, right? And then fly to Atlanta, go get dinner with you, Jason, or spend a week or 2 with my co-founder, and I can go there for that, but I can come back here to a place that I thrive. And it's really about that for me, being in this environment. And the environment is what's around us. It's also what we're hearing every day. So Pura Vida mindset. Walk into a restaurant in Costa Rica and you could, or anywhere really, if you're just walking around, I very rarely hear people just generally complaining.
Yeah.
If it's just complaining, I generally, if somebody's like, oh, well, my house got flooded last night, Pura Vida, and that's it. It's all right, we got to fix it now. And so it's really a beautiful mindset. And there's obviously negatives to that too. It's hey, I have a hole in my ceiling in the office. It's literally pouring water in here. Pura Vida. I'm like, no, I need no Pura Vida right now. I need you to come fix the hole in my office. So there's a balance with that. But all jokes aside, living better it's really a mindset, and it's, and then for me, it's really being a product of my environment to where it makes it easy for me to go out and surf or go run or be in nature or easily reconnect with things that make me personally thrive.
Yeah. Does that also imply, do you think the contrast between your Atlanta life and your life in Costa Rica has given you more clarity on the things that the environmental pieces that give you what you're talking about? Would you be more likely to be able to recreate what you have now in a new context if you were to do it again at some point in your future?
I think it's a constant evolution, but I don't think I would have this perspective without having lived in Atlanta and here for an extended period of time. I've been down here for, it's going to be going on 7 years. And I was in Atlanta for about 10. And so I have a pretty good pulse from a time, like, perspective, looking back is, it's super, it's vital. As far as recreating again in the future, I think it's always evolving. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, for me, it's an evolution, but the one thing I will say on that is like, every time I think life can't get better, I mean, before I moved to Costa Rica, it was amazing. I was super happy. It gets better, and I think for me, it's just imagining, like, what's a better version of this life right now, and thinking through that and creating that,
Yeah.
or more balance. So for me, that more balanced version would probably be more frequent trips to get my professional stimulation. So
Yeah.
more frequent trips to the States to get that professional stimulation, and maybe being a little bit more kind of in nature. But the nature piece can be challenging because I work online, so I have to have great internet. Before I lived where I live now, we lived in the mountains, but I had 2 megs of internet at home. It's
Yeah.
really hard to run a business off of 2 megs of internet. So the only thing I would change now is more frequent trips to the States, and creating a more, I would probably be more in the jungle than I am right now. Like,
Mm.
more in the jungle, but you got to balance that out, right? Maybe with Starlink, maybe I can have that dream realized. I
You
mean,
could
that's
have your
definitely been on the
cake and eat it
radar
too.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think also the kind of contrast, one of the things you said earlier, like like you talked about making a list, the pros and the cons. I think there's fundamentally there's also like where the pros and cons are usually the tip of the iceberg, in the sense of, like, we have no idea what entails us on the other side of that decision. And so without making that leap, like, rationally speaking, we may not be able to even imagine, or I guess imagine would be the right word, to imagine the possibilities, unless we do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you have someone that has made that leap, you obviously can listen to their story, but even that is limited because it's just them telling you the story. It's not you going there and having this profound experience and then living there and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. And all experiences aren't profound either. Like, I had this profound experience, and then I moved to Costa Rica after having this profound experience. And that profound experience was able to carry me through kind of like difficult situations. Like, I'm not saying I moved down here and it's just been incredible and amazing, and I haven't had like lots of challenges and hurdles and things to overcome. I mean, it's life. It's a second world country. There's a lot to overcome. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I say, what advice would you have to someone? Okay, they made the decision, they've made the leap, they have arrived on the other side, and how do they make the most of it? How do they really take advantage of that opportunity, and make sure that whether it succeeds or fails, it's not because they didn't put in the effort or activity to do that?
I think that the answer to that really depends on the person, and their motivations for moving. I mean, as does anything, but to make the most out of it, I would highly recommend being in a place where you maybe have some contact with somebody from your home country. So maybe a place that you can find an expat nearby, but you're mostly immersed by locals. I think local immersion is really important. Also, the desire to, like, live this lifestyle. So if I came down here and I wanted to get, my athletic greens from New Zealand shipped every month, not happening. Like, it's literally just, it's not happening. It can't happen. It's impossible. It's not impossible, but I'd be paying 3 times the price because of import laws. But I'm
Mm,
okay with that. I'm willing to, you know, change my diet or change the things that I've been accustomed to in the States that were easy, and maybe, make salads with more different types of lettuce, or have other ways. But for me, it was really immersing. So my diet right now is rice, beans, a protein salad, and usually plantains. And that's a pretty common diet. Obviously that's not every day, but that's a pretty common diet here in Costa Rica. And it's really, um, it's affordable.
yeah.
Now when locals come over, there's a lot of benefits to it, and you're eating stuff that's sourced from the land. And so if I had made the decision to move to Costa Rica and still be getting the protein shakes and the supplements and all the things that I love to get, home delivery, Amazon subscribe and save, all of that every month, then my experience would have been very different. It would have been very frustrating. It would have been going to the post office. And if you think the post office in the United States is bad, come to the post office in Costa Rica. But if you go into the post office a lot, customs a lot, it just would have been a whole different experience just from a decision as small as adjusting my diet to match the local diet. So I think immersion is really important. Learning the language is so important. So wherever you go, I think that that's a critical piece of it. Because one, it helps you grow as a person. I mean, learning a language helps pave new pathways in your brain. It does a bunch of positive things for your mental health, but it also helps you communicate with the local population. And I think that authentic connection becomes really beautiful. So that would be the second recommendation, would be learning the language, and get a local tutor, or don't just Duolingo it, right? Like, find someone
and how
local.
much of the language, so there's the literal language, but also what about like the cultural language and just the values and orientation of the people? How would you, was that part of that language, or are you saying more just literally learn the language?
I mean, I think that's a really great point. And I think there are plenty of people who learn the language but don't learn the cultural language. So I think that's a really great point. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the heart. If you don't know the language, it gets harder to learn the cultural language. You can learn it, but I think that that's really often overlooked. And that can, I can't think of what's going to my mind right now is surfing, but the surf code is, I think, the same everywhere in the world. But if I'm a foreigner going to the beach, I'm not gonna steal away from a local, right? And so that's a cultural contact. I mean, that's true anywhere in the world. I mean, I think anywhere in the world from a surfing perspective, but I think that, yeah, that's really important. I'm trying to think something that's specific to Costa Rica that would be a big shock. But I know that there are other cultures that there are cultural cues that are much more of a larger shock than what I experienced coming down here.
Yeah. So let's talk about on the work side of things. So what does it look like to work smarter, and what have you learned about that from your time there?
So I've been
is it just a matter of surfing? Is that what it comes down to?
Wish I could do that. I wish I could say that I could balance my work-life balance so well that I could surf every day, but definitely not the case. Definitely go weeks without it sometimes. So working smarter to me is, again, it's really a mindset, and it's really about having like a results only focus. So ever since even early in my career, my mindset has been, what is the most direct way for me to make the biggest impact? And that's kind of that's been my North Star with really anything I do. If it's with any client engagement, any project I do, like, what is the most direct way to make like the biggest impact? And so I think that a lot of that has formed, the way that we run FounderScale. Like, we're a results only an organization, so if you can find a way from going from, A to B much shorter than the way that we've been doing, then let's do that. So I think that's one piece. Working smarter has also evolved, especially, I always hate referring to COVID because I feel like it's so overused now, but it really has. Like, working smarter, the definition of that has probably changed as a society since COVID, in the sense that, okay, well, now I can, work right up until I have to pick up, or have to run, the nanny gets off, and so I have to take care of my son. So I don't even have to have a commute from my work to my house. I just am there, once my nanny's done. So I think that context, I definitely agree with that. I'm definitely all on the, like, I love the flexibility of being able to run, go, get a wave, and then come back to work, or, from that perspective. But really, like, working smarter, so let me turn the air on, it's getting a little warm in here. From working smarter, I think the other thing too is, from one of our values at FounderScale is 10x. And that's internal and external. So it's like, how can we 10x anything we do? So if we deliver a project for a client and we were going to deliver it 10 times, how would we change the way we delivered that to be able to deliver it 10 times? And then how can we also provide 10 times the value? And so we're always having this mindset of like 10xing the value or the way that we do things. And essentially that leads to scalability, it leads to driving more results, and it leads to bigger impact. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's shift towards this topic of mentoring. What do you think about mentoring, and how important is it or not?
So I'm a huge fan of mentoring. I did a lot more of it pre Costa Rica than I do now. But I'm a huge fan of mentoring. I'm a big fan of coaching, being coached. And I think mentor can be, something that you can call it advisor, mentor, coach. There's a lot of words that you can put for, use for the word mentoring. I think it's important to be mentored, and I also think it's really important to mentor. And obviously the benefits of being mentor, you have the insight of somebody who's been there before, done that before, and they can help you along your journey. But I think the benefits of mentoring, beyond of just giving back, I think mentoring really helps, at least me, learn how to be a better business leader. And like one example that I think a lot about is like I have a lot of coaches in my life. I have a running coach, I have a strength coach. I think I guess those are only two coaches that I have right now. I feel like there's another one, but anyway, and I'm a big fan of having coaches because, they know things better than we do. And it's the same thing as mentors. But from a mentorship perspective, one of the things that I found to be the biggest benefit to me is that I learned how to be a better business leader. And one example was when you tell someone how to do something versus when you ask them questions so they can determine how to do it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say there's a distinct difference between the mentoring culture between the two countries of Costa Rica and America? Or is it?
I haven't really, to be honest, since I moved down here, I haven't really attempted to do any mentoring here. And neither have I tried to do it remote. So I can't really speak to if there's any difference in mentoring. I can say that the location is pretty important here in Costa Rica. So typically if somebody finds a job, they move to go so if you want to get a good job, you move to San Jose, you move to the city. You're not going to be out in the jungle. So most of the opportunities are already going to be mentoring like technology companies or anything like that. Most of those opportunities would be in the cities.
Okay. So let's talk about stories. What are some real or fictional narratives or stories that have shaped you as a person?
Well, I don't know if you or any of your listeners have ever listened or ever read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho.
I'm familiar with it, but I've never read it. Yeah.
It's a really famous book about this boy who goes to search and treasure, and he goes throughout this whole journey to essentially discover who he is, and he finds his treasure, and it's this great story.
Yeah.
Well, if you've read it, I read this book on the way back from Costa Rica to Atlanta. So after I had this hugely profound experience, I read the book on the way back, and it was the nail in the coffin. Because essentially there's all these beautiful, I wish I had pulled a couple of quotes, but there's all these beautiful quotes in it around following your heart and finding the stillness and some of these things that I've talked about today. It's really all about going on the journey and following the journey, because the journey is going to lead you where you want to go, or where you really need to go. And so that book was really profound, especially because it's what made me make the final decision to move. I knew when I landed back in the United States, I was like, it's done. I'll give it a couple months, but I knew after reading that book. So definitely read that book. It's really wonderful. It's fiction. I'm not a big fiction reader. I primarily read business nonfiction.
Yeah.
But that book definitely life-changing.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of a cliche, but
yeah.
A lot of people say it's a life-changing book, but I'm gonna jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah. How would you say narrative plays out when you think about the companies and clients you work with, in terms of how the narratives shape how they think about business, how they operate, who they are, what they do, how they interact with you, whether or not they think that you can help them, things like that?
So I've been an entrepreneur my whole career. I went to art school, started a photography business after art school, then started a marketing firm, and I'm here today. I've had businesses. I feel that pain. I felt the pain of growing. I felt the pain of scaling, having a team, losing a team, all of those things. So we work primarily with founders of B2B services companies. So when we engage with the founders, like, we viscerally know what they're going through and what they're feeling from a business perspective. A dollar to a founder is very different than a dollar to a corporation. So when we work with founders and we engage with them, I mean, we're immediately speaking the same language. And another unique there is we don't only work with services founders. I've worked with e-commerce and SaaS, and I've done quite a bit in that arena, but we work with a lot of B2B services. And B2B services is unique in the sense that you're not going out and no one's writing you a $5 million check to grow your B2B services business.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're making an acquisition, you'll get that check, but they really don't get funded in the same way SaaS gets. And they're typically just the way to grow them is typically done initially by the founder's warm network. People know, like, and trust the founder. They give them the business, and that's how the founder gets to, their first $700,000 $1 million in sales. Primarily, our sweet spot is founders who are over $1 million, and we help them get to those next milestones. But once you build that business up and to getting you to the next milestone, you really have to go from being like doing founder-led sales, so the founders doing all the sales for the organization, to where you have a team, whether that be sales, marketing. You basically have a team that's doing the sales on your behalf.
Yeah.
Because to really get to the next level of working on the business, they want to get to where they were working on the business and not in the business. And that's sort of like been there, done that. Like, I know that pain.
Yeah.
And so
what's the narrative?
is really similar.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was gonna say, what's the narrative in their head that's holding them back to making that leap?
So it's really, it's hard. It's really hard. And what worked for other people's businesses, like what someone could be like, oh yeah, I sent an email and got like 5 deals. Well, you have to have a lot of context on that, right? Oh, really? You sent an email, you sent it to a list of 200 people that are super, super warm that you've engaged with over the past, of course, context is everything, right? So it's hard to go from you being the one to drive all the sales and then have a team doing it. So if we're talking about mental blocks, it's like they don't know. Like they don't know. They just really don't know what to try. And they probably tried a lot of things, but a lot of those things work for bigger companies, but they don't work for companies of that size. And they wasted a lot of money. They're scared to try something else. It's scary. It's scary to risk a lot to scale, but it's also that the option is risking and scaling or staying where you are, which some founders are okay with. Not the ones we've worked with, but some people are okay with that,
So is that the same narrative questions and doubts that you had when you made your decision to go to Costa Rica? Like you said, everyone, might say, well, you have everything to lose. The risk is too high, right?
No, I mean,
no.
There was no doubt, like not even the smallest kernel of doubts, grain of sand doubt in my mind that this was the right decision for me.
Well, I'm not saying that it wasn't the right decision, but I'm just saying those, essentially, for the person that is struggling to make the leap, they are having those doubts, those questions. Or are they?
The leap, like in their organization.
Yeah, in terms of like, obviously they're working with you to help them make that transition into that scale, but there's something they're lacking that's keeping them from doing that. And so these fears, there's a lot at stake for them to make that transition. And like you said, if they've tried things and it hasn't worked, are those fears essentially clouding the possibility? I'll give you a practical example. I had this with the client once. He tried something, didn't work, and was like done with it. And when he ended up working with me, I said, I think we should really try this. And he said, oh, it didn't work and I lost a lot of money. I said, well, what if he did it differently? And he still was just resistant. So I kind of went around to this vendor. I kind of told them all the concerns they had, and they were willing to sort of accommodate all of them. And I said, okay, they're willing to accommodate all your concerns and restructure how you interface with them so that all your concerns are addressed. Would you be interested in trying this? And so reluctantly, he tried it, and it ended up generating like 20% of the business's revenue within a year. So it was like the very thing that he needed to grow his business was the very thing he was actively fighting me against. So I don't know if that's helpful in contextualizing my question, but that's an example.
Yeah, and we see that all the time. Like, oh, that didn't work for me. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, the way you did it didn't work for you because it wouldn't work that way for your business. And so I think
Yeah.
a lot of it's context. I think a lot of this is building trust. I mean, and it's different. It's
Yeah.
different when you sell to a corporation than when you sell to a founder. It's really building trust and being their guide on that journey and being an ally with them. It's not you sign the check and now we're delivering the service. It's really being an ally with them and helping them beyond what maybe, beyond what the actual delivery is of like, hey, we have these other ideas that just want to share with you that may be helpful for you and your organization. And so I think by positioning ourselves, because we've been there and we're there in many ways, right?
Yeah.
By positioning ourselves as the guide and someone who can help them and works and walks with them, I think that's a really important narrative that is different than if we were working with like a corporation. I think that's a really big narrative change, and that's really important for us too, because we don't want to work with people who don't want to improve and grow and don't have the same values as we do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because it's there's a lot of layers there. I guess the thing I'd be curious for you to dive into deeper would be this trust piece. Because I think I think this might be globally, but in America, we have a trust problem in our institutions and our leaders and each other. Everyone's kind of got this almost cynicism towards each other. So how do you reconcile that trust piece? How do you cultivate it? How do you navigate against cynicism? Is that a factor you deal with a lot in the business and with the clients and types of clients you work with?
Not well. I wouldn't go with cynicism. I think that we do our good job of self-selecting the people we want to work with, because work makes up like a third of my life, right? More than a third
Yeah.
of my life. And I want to work with people I enjoy working with. And if we get to a point in an engagement where we realize that our values are different or we don't agree with the client's cynical, or if we have certain things that maybe we're not aligned on, we just end the engagement, and like move on. I think that's really important. I think that's the first piece is really still being very careful about who you work with. Just like who you bring into your personal life is just the same thing as who you bring into your business life. And that's kind of one of the definitely benefits of having your own company or owning a company is you can choose who to work with and who not to work with. But that's not to say that we don't work with founders that are like, that's not going to work, but they trust us enough. If they're like, well, that's not going to work, they trust us enough, like, but I'll let you try it. And we're like, and then if it doesn't work, like, great, you're right. It usually works, but there's that trust factor. So I think for us, I think the number one thing is trust, and they can, I can't even remember really maybe one client we worked with that was really cynical. So I think that it's also an alignment of values, and that's really important when self-selecting.
So how do you cultivate that trust?
Well, I think we just like the organizations we help, a lot of our sales come from a warm, trusted network. So my co-founder is heavily involved in entrepreneurs organization EO. So he speaks to a lot of founders all the time that are going through what we're going through. So we work with a lot of EO members because we're walking through the same journey right now. That's one way. And then I think the other way is really education. It's educating them early and often and really making sure they understand the why That's the second, like the why we're doing this and the education piece without getting too in the weeds. And then the third piece is expectation management and giving them a timeline and what to expect. So
Yeah.
if we know this initiative is going to take 6 months before we see any sort of positive return on it, being very upfront about that and reinforcing that, like, these are the things that we are doing now that's going to have a result then, and this is, this is what to expect. I think that those are the kind of the three most important things.
Yeah. So what you're also talking about is, and we can shift towards, is systems, right? So how do you have systems that help accomplish these types of goals? So how do you think about and use systems? You mentioned earlier that you're kind of like systemically minded. So tell us about that.
Which is interesting because I am systemically minded, but I'm certainly not like engineer minded. I always
Hmm.
joke, my younger sister, she's a mechanical engineer. She builds schematics for boom trucks, the trucks that
Yeah.
work on the electrical lines. I always joke that I'm the artist and she's the engineer. And that's very true. But so just want to call that out. Systematically minded, perhaps. But you know, when I think about these systems, I mean, it's, when I kind of was thinking about this question, I was really thinking about how can we mimic more in our in our lives to mimic natural systems that can work without the
Mm,
intervention of other people. So I got my permaculture design certificate a couple of years ago, and permaculture is a way of designing and caring for land that essentially, we're land stewards. We focus on using things multiple times. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it, but essentially the greater idea is that if I have this piece of land that's designed as a designed in the permaculture way, then I can leave that land and everything functions without my interaction.
hmm.
You have a monoculture, you're growing a bunch of corn, you leave that corn, the corn's going to die. But if you have this systems that you build and they all work together, these natural systems, then it all works if you remove yourself from the system.
Yeah.
And that's how we think about systems when it comes to founders. Like, we need to apply that exact thought to the founder
Mm,
building their business and their system. So if they want to go, out on the boat tomorrow morning, or they want to go golfing or want to go surf, the system's running without them having to touch
yeah.
it.
Yeah. So what is that? So in terms of like the literal land management approach, as the gardener or the steward of that land, who is creating a land ecosystem that's sustaining without them, how does that change that person's role with that land? Like, what is their part in it at that point if the system runs without them?
Helping the system thrive.
Okay.
Yeah, helping the system thrive, looking at the system from like a higher perspective and seeing what more can we do to help the system thrive. So in the land perspective, if we know that this is how we can plant a forest of food that's going to produce food without any action, then that forest is producing. But now what we want to do is we want to probably see the health of the trees. Like, look back, is there anything that we can do to this whole system to make the whole system better? So it's very much that CEO visionary mindset of like the CEO as a visionary versus the CEO working in the business.
Yeah.
We're not planting the trees anymore. We're actually looking at them and being like, okay, how can we make this whole entire
Mm,
system better versus the singular elements of the system, which the singular element would be like sales or marketing
yeah.
or,
Yeah.
operations.
So it allows them to intervene in a way that's it's less about keeping it alive, but more about, okay, here's some area that we could actually kind of grow it or accelerate its growth or whatever, or
Yeah,
just
we
help it
like
be
trim the
better.
trees. We trim the trees. So next year when the mangoes come in, there's way more mangoes on the tree, right?
Yeah.
We cut the banana leaves off and put it on the ground, and then that creates produces soil in the ground and healthier soil. And so there's these big changes across the whole system. Not big changes, but they're really looking at systematic things versus like individual, like, okay, we're gonna plant this thing there, and we're going to put this, water well over there, and we're going to put this lake right here. It's really about how do we make the system work better? Or, wow, this year it flooded a lot. And
Yeah.
this isn't how we want the water running through the property. So let's figure out the best way for the water to run through the property so it doesn't flood again. Same way, we got overwhelmed because we onboarded 10 clients in a month. How can we
Yeah.
make sure that things get, run through the property so everything can get, absorbed properly or delivered properly, however you want to
Yeah.
apply it.
Well, and the other implication there is, as far as what I'm visualizing, is that the way that type of land would be set up is very overlapping. I think in America we have our kind of curated, compartmentalized parts of the garden. This is the grass, and then this is where the tomatoes go, and everything is sort of compartmentalized. But I think what you're describing is something where it's all sort of on top of each other and interacting. Is that correct, or is there still
There's different
some sense of?
zones. Like there's
Okay.
different zones, so you'll have a zone that, in permaculture, there's different zones. So for example, if you're applying this to like a house you have in the States, there's your zone 1 would be the zone that's closest to your house. That's where you'd have your basil, to run outside and grab basil for your cooking, and your herbs
Mm,
and your lettuces and the things that you need right away. And that's designed there. And that's designed in a way because it's going to need more care and more maintenance and more attention than maybe your zone 6, which is going to be your food forest, which is probably, 500, 600, 800, 1,000 feet away from your house, because you don't need to access that all the time. And so they're very intentionally designed zones that as a whole system work together, but you also, as the human being in that system, are able to flow through those based on your needs as well.
got it. Okay, so it's a mutual type of experience. So do you think that part of what, like you're talking a lot about this literal garden and the lessons you're learning, which you then apply to business, right? Which help you grow and do better. As a society in America that's often very urbanized, living in concrete jungles, are we missing out on a lot of those lessons?
Well, I will tell you, when I don't know if I was 8, 10, I was, a kid, my parents had a garden, and I can distinctly remember stomping around and being like, this is so stupid. I will never, ever do this when I'm out of this house. And my parents were like, you just wait. Once you grow up, you just wait. And so I always laugh about that memory, because here I am like creating that. But as far as whether we're missing out on it or not, it's really hard to have a garden if you don't have the time and energy and everything to dedicate to it. I mean, have you ever had a garden?
My wife's does it, but I'm mostly not, uninvolved. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
really difficult. And if you look at it on a scale of actually having food, like actually growing food that you're going to be able to consume and eat, that
Hmm.
even becomes more difficult, because there's so much planning that has to go into that. Like when I first lived here, we cohabitated with a couple other people. And we had probably 30 or 40 beds of food we were planning. It was very large. And we primarily grew what we ate. We had chickens and all of those things. And that was a great experience, and probably wouldn't do it again. Like my cohabitation piece is a little difficult, but it was a great experience. And I don't think that could be replicated in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't think we could take these ideals and be like, hey, suburban, let's get all these things. But there may be elements of that that can be replicated, like community gardens, right? Or food forest. I mean, there are also, well, so there's like community gardens and there's food forests. And I know some communities are, making that a thing where you don't even have to rent a plot. It comes with your home now.
Mm,
So there are things that are moving in that direction. But I think it's really difficult because of the systems that are being set up in the States. In
yeah.
some places, it's illegal to harvest rainwater. You
Oh wow.
can't plant fruit trees because your HOA doesn't want flies or bugs or
Oh
whatever. So there's all these laws that have been put in place to actually make it pretty difficult and not on all states, but this isn't like, every state has its own laws, every county has its own laws, but generally speaking, it's really hard to do something like this in the United States without running
yeah.
into like a lot of bureaucratic or zoning or, issues like that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Well, is there anything else you want to share that you didn't get a chance to, or any other wisdom you'd like to put out there as we wrap up here?
I mean, I think like, I really think that the only thing I would like to leave is just this concept of learning to really tune in to yourself and then tune out, I don't want to say other people, because it's tuning out the programs that you've already, like, people we've been taught. We have programs that we've been taught from a young age. And so really being able to tune in and cultivating that art of finding a stillness to be able to tune in, because that's really the secret to finding what what's waiting for you on the other side of that. And it's really what your soul is burning to do. And so, that journey is different for everybody, but I just really want to emphasize the importance of that, of being able to find that stillness and really being able to listen to oneself. Because I think now more than ever, it's harder to do. So just want to, highlight the importance of that. You never know where you may end up if you do that.
Yeah. So how can people connect with you? What are you up to? Where can they find you?
Well, if you come down to Costa Rica, you can certainly reach out. Twitter and LinkedIn are the best places to connect with me. It's just my name is my handle, so it's at Maria Joyner for both Twitter and LinkedIn. And I can also be reached via email, maria@founderscale.com.
Cool. All right. Well, I'll put those links in the page. And thank you very much for sharing your life with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.